looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die.
Yes, I've been studying archaeology and ancient history for a long time, and Old Persian, and I'm Jewish, and I was educated in the Old Testament, and I think it's important for people to realize that archaeologists and geologists have been in the Middle East for well over 100 years using modern methods. Many of them are dedicated Christians and Jews and Muslims, all of whom believe in the Old Testament. And the reason why none of them think that Noah's Ark could be on Mount Ararat is because from what we know of modern science, it would take Mount Ararat being, 13,000, 14,000 feet, would take such a huge flood to place an ark there that the flood would leave signs all over, virtually all over the Middle East, and there are no signs whatsoever of such a huge flood. There are small local floods in, Sumer and Eridu and Kish and places like that, but virtually no signs, no geological signs of a flood.
Mr. Wyatt?
Okay, I appreciate your observation there, sir. Now, we will have to agree with you on the fact that this boat could not be on Ararat for many reasons. It's a post-flood volcano. There's glaciers with the associated glacier flow, and the Bible specifies that the ark landed in mountains, plural, of Urartu, and that was quite a large empire out there. And so it is not on Mount Ararat. It's 12 miles to the south on a place called Mount Masr, or Mountain of Pain, or something to that extent. Now, as to your worldwide evidences of a flood, I will disagree with you there, sir. There is evidence of worldwide flood because of marine fossils at the Cretaceous level. Everything, and that's a roughly average of 7,000 feet around the globe, and everything above that is obviously upthrusted material. And so when you say that these people all agree, I have to agree that the predominance of people in this type of research say this, but sadly they are quoting the textbooks that they studied in school, and they have not done field archaeology on this, or they would not say that.
On June 20th, 1987, in the mountains of Ararat, Turkey officially recognized the discovery of Noah's Ark. Located on a mountainside about 15 miles south of the volcanic Mount Ararat, the remains of the massive ship were dedicated during a special ceremony. Guest of honor was Ron Wyatt, due to his 10 years of research at the site. The story began in 1957 during the Cold War, when aerial photos taken of eastern Turkey while searching for Soviet missile bases revealed a strange boat-shaped formation in the mountains about 6,300 feet above sea level. Life magazine reported on the story after an expedition from the United States went to the site in 1960. Blowing holes in the strange formation, the members of the team came away with the conclusion that there was nothing there of any archaeological interest. Ron Wyatt, like many others, read the story, but he was of the opinion that the site needed further exploration. There had been many claims of seeing Noah's Ark on the volcanic Mount Ararat, but Ron knew that it was a stratovolcano, and he believed that nothing would have been able to survive there. he noted the biblical account of the location of the ark. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat.
On Ron Wyatt's first trip to the region in 1977, he didn't know where to begin searching, and he only had 3 days in the area.
We were looking at all these mountains we were going through, and Dad realized, he's like, guys, you see how rugged this place is? He said, do you know that we have no clue as to what direction to look in once we get there? And we're like, yeah, because we didn't have the map coordinates. We had nothing except the picture in the book and, you know, the area of where it was around Mount Ararat that it was taken. And so we were becoming real skeptical on whether we were going to get to see anything this trip. And then once we got off the train, we hired a cab to take us in to Dugobazit, the town close to Mount Ararat. And while we were driving, it was at night, and Dad said, guys, he quoted the scripture, and so Dad said we should all say a prayer that God help us know which way to look. And we basically all three just said a separate prayer, bowed our heads, and said a separate prayer in the car silently. And just a few minutes later, the car died, and everything went off. The headlights, the engine shut off, everything. So he had to immediately pull over because it was night and he couldn't see. And so he got up under the hood and looked, and he couldn't find anything wrong, didn't know what was wrong with it. And he just goes like this. He couldn't speak much English, so he just goes, you know. And he sits back down in the car and tries it, and it starts back up. Well, during that time, Dad said, hey, you know, we just got done saying that prayer, and then the car died. He said, just in case that was God's answering our prayer, let's pile up a big pile of rocks here on the side of the road to mark where this car stopped. Okay. So we did it, and then the car started back up, and we hopped back in and went on down the road, and it did it again. Everything, lights and everything shut off again. And we're like, oh man, you know. And Dad said, well, you know, let's pile up another pile of rocks here. And so we did that, and then sat there a few minutes, and the car started right back up again. And just went a few more miles, and it did it again a third time. And by then, my dad was a little skeptical. Even he said, well, guys, I think the car's probably just messed up. Yeah. He said, but just in case, let's pile up another big pile of rocks here, just in case this is something, you know. And so we all figured, well, yeah, the car's just breaking down. Yeah. And so then after that, the car started right back up, and we drove on into town and got our hotel room.
Yeah, and no trouble. Yeah, I got the hotel room. Then the next day, I guess we got a cab, and he took us out. It was somebody from the village around there. He was our guide, actually, and he took us out. Then we found the pile of rocks, the first pile, and I guess we went to the first pile. Yeah. We had 3 piles there. I think we went to the first one first and walked out. You know, it was hot. We had a canteen, ended up having a hole in it. So, yeah, we drank what water we could before it all emptied out.
Yeah, so we all drank it so it wouldn't.
Yeah, we all got sunburnt in that, but we found the anchor stone, which we had never seen one. Dad had seen some in the pictures, some smaller ones, but nothing that big. So he kind of knew what it was.
And there were 8 crosses on the anchor stone?
Yeah, 8 crosses on the anchor stone. Yeah, the next pile. Did the next one go to the
village in the house?
Yeah, the next pile of rocks went to Noah's.
The house and the graveyard.
Yeah.
This photo was taken in 1977 by Ron Wyatt, showing the walls of Noah's home. Since then, all the walls have been torn down by local treasure seekers. In the front yard stood this large tombstone. On the tombstone was a drawing of 8 people and a boat on a wave. The second largest person was looking downward with their eyes closed. This indicates that this was Mrs. Noah's tombstone. After Mr. Wyatt showed this to someone, That person later hired others to exhume Mrs. Noah's 18-foot sarcophagus.
And then that third pile was actually Noah's Ark, which was probably the first pile.
Well, yeah, because we did it
Because we
backwards.
came back from it the opposite way. And it was amazing because I had never in my life said a prayer and had an answer that definite, that quick. Just knowing full well that,
Of course, that night we thought
Gave
it
you
was just the
goosebumps.
car breaking down, but the next day when we walked out and found that, we knew that it was, because like I say, it was, the countryside was so rough, barren, we couldn't have found that.
there was no way in the world we could have found it. We didn't even know to go to the right or left side of the road, or no idea. And
So we pulled up on the
walked
side.
straight out to them.
Principle. But the factor that captured his interest the most was the length given in the Life magazine story, 500 feet. Most people were looking for a 437-foot Noah's Ark based on the Hebrew cubit, but Ron again went to the Bible to learn more. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Moses was the author of the Genesis account of the flood. He would have known the cubit of the Egyptians. The Hebrew cubit didn't come into existence until there was a Hebrew nation after Moses' death. The Encyclopedia Britannica stated, "The Egyptian cubit is generally recognized as having been the most ubiquitous or universal standard of linear measurement in the very ancient world. The royal cubit equals 20.62 inches. This would mean Noah's Ark was much longer than 437 feet. 17 years after the Life magazine article, Ron finally made the journey to Turkey. When he saw the boat-shaped object, he saw that it looked just like it did in 1960, and he knew he would need permission to excavate in order to learn anything about what was beneath the surface. So he returned home and enlisted a number of friends to help him pray for an earthquake to reveal more. In late 1978, he learned of an earthquake in eastern Turkey and returned in August of 1979. When he arrived, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. The earthquake had dropped the soil around the object, and a large crack extended the entire length. He could see what looked to him like the remains of decayed rib timbers along the now exposed sides. Also, he was able to measure the depth of the debris and measure the length. It was 515 feet, or exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. He was now convinced. He carefully combed the surface, looking for evidence that it was a shipwreck. He saw what he believed were petrified structures of an ancient ship whose deck had collapsed. He saw what looked like deck joists and deck support timbers. In 1984, Ron met and became friends with Colonel Jim Irwin, the former astronaut. Colonel Irwin was searching for Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, but he was very gracious and was interested in seeing the boat-shaped site. Ron had brought a metal detector to the site to see if there was a pattern of metal readings. In the presence of Colonel Irwin and others on his team, Ron employed the detectors. He found distinct metal lines down the entire length of the object, while no metal readings were obtained just outside of it. Ron asked Colonel Irwin, who had impressive scientific community connections, if he could have the strange specimen tested. Colonel Irwin sent the specimen to Los Alamos National Labs, where geophysicist John Baumgartner performed the analysis. The results of that analysis captured Dr. Baumgartner's interest. The specimen contained manganese, also titanium and aluminum, among others, and these were not in the form found in nature. Due to the sophistication of the metals, he questioned whether a missile had crashed on the mountainside and Ron had found the remains. The exciting evidences of the metal lines and the analysis of the specimens brought two new researchers into the work. Dr. Baumgartner and David Fassel, the marine salvage expert who knew all about ships and their construction. They both joined the team.
Oh, look at that. Oh, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute, let me get a close-up of that. Kind of,
You want my hand in there?
yeah, just to point at those little
Okay.
flakes of iron that are coming out, like right there. There and there. Huh. That's a strong reading. Well,
I'd say that those frames right there.
okay. Keep walking. Do you want a measuring tape to measure these things, how far apart they are?
So John, as a scientist, might I take the liberty here to ask you, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. Metal has a regular pattern to it, and the size of the thing and the shape of the thing is such that it's almost certainly a large boat.
Dr. Baumgartner and Ron scanned the entire site with 3 different types of metal detectors. Placing rocks at each metal reading, they then attached tapes to show the lines. While Turkish scientists and archaeologists did their own research, Ron and his associates continued their work. The next step was subsurface interface radar.
There's the longitudinal bulkhead. You ought to see it popping out, man.
Yeah, there they are.
There's
Yeah.
another one. There's the keel line right there.
Yeah.
Oh, Ron, the lines are there. The lines are there.
Okay, we're gonna walk over,
Yeah, that's what.
take a look.
Leave it running so everybody knows that we're not cheating here, right?
You got it. Cool.
Okay. Now, this is the west bulkhead. Okay, can you look through there?
All right,
This is the west bulkhead.
all right.
That was over there. And he walked easterly. Here we start getting the longitudinal bulkheads. Here, 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 here.
Okay.
You see there how it shows up?
All right.
The initial scans were very impressive, showing internal structure consistent with bulkheads and rooms. But to be sure they were interpreting the data correctly, Ron took the scan printouts to Geophysical Survey Systems, the developer and manufacturer of the radar.
This data it does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random, natural type interval.
There was no longer any doubt that this was the remains of something man-made. In late 1986, the Turks announced their decision. The ceremony was set for June 1987. During that ceremony, the governor asked Ron to demonstrate the radar on site for the journalists and military officials. When Ron showed them a readout that he said looked like an intact timber, the governor then instructed a soldier to dig right there. What emerged was this petrified section of fossilized hand-wrought timber. Sectioning showed it to be laminated wood, 5 layers of timber glued together with pitch, clearly visible oozing from the end.
It was tested at Galbraith Labs for organic carbon. The level of organic carbon was extremely high, thus proving this object was once living matter, consistent with wood. Using radar equipment, Ron Wyatt discovered an open cavity on the starboard side of the Ark. Utilizing a core drilling technique, he was able to gain access to the interior of the Ark. Stunning evidence was pulled from the belly of the ship. Using an improvised long rake device, petrified animal dung was extracted from the hull. Next, cat hair was also pulled from the cavity. Then, a petrified antler was extracted. These are all items that one would expect to find in the bottom of the Ark. The Bible tells us the antediluvians were skilled in metalworking. Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. This large metal rivet, or metal washer around a metal rod, was found by Ron Wyatt when he had taken a tour group to the site in 1991. The center rod had been struck while it was hot, causing it to flare out, holding the washer in place. Test results showed that it contained 8% aluminum metal. Aluminum metal is man-made, thus proving the site to be man-made. Skeptics have said Mr. Wyatt was lying about the testing, but was he really? When the Ark Discovery International team was at the Ark site, they used a metal detector to locate metal fittings on the Ark. This is a crescent-shaped piece of metal that had been a circular washer in its better days and was found near the bow on the port side. A portion of it tested at Galbraith Labs in Tennessee, and the results were stunning. It was 8% aluminum metal, just as Ron Wyatt's test had revealed. The test additionally showed a small amount of titanium metal that is also man-made. The Ark Discovery team continued its analysis at the site and located another fitting on the starboard side. A portion of it was sent to Galbraith Labs for testing, and again, there were incredible results. It contained 8% aluminum metal, 1.3% titanium metal, plus 3.8% magnesium metal, all indicative of the Ark formation being a man-made structure. The Encyclopedia Britannica tells us, because of its chemical activity, aluminum never occurs in the metallic form in nature. These unique metal components are special markers that were left behind, which prove the site is without a doubt a man-made structure, utilizing high-tech construction techniques, consistent with what we should find in Noah's Ark. Modern man didn't discover how to make aluminum metal until around 1900, but the antediluvians had this knowledge in their day. Other metal fittings were found on the port side of the deck. Our metal detector picked up metal readings where a rectangular plate was positioned on a flat plane. This plate originally had 6 rivets. One is still visible on the left side.
Now we're going to come to some evidence that I believe is really strong in supporting this area as the site of Noah's Ark. In this area have been found around 30 drogue and anchor stones. As mentioned earlier, these drogue and anchor stones were used as ship stabilizers to better withstand storms and cause drag, so ships weren't driven and tossed on the oceans. Found in this area are around 30 of these drogue and anchor stones. They are found scattered along a path running from west to east. It appears as the waters were receding from the Great Flood, the drogue stones began hitting the land under the water, and then they were cut loose. The remaining stones are generally in the area where the Ark eventually came to rest. Many of these stones have holes carved in them for connecting ropes from the Ark to the stones. Some of the holes have broken over the years in some of the stones. So on the tops of these stones, they had holes in them, and the ropes would go through those holes, then they were attached to the Ark. These drogue stones were continually used in ancient times after the flood and can be found in places like Israel and the Nile River in Egypt. So these drogue stones were something commonly used in ancient ship sailing, and they were used as ballast, they were used as stabilizers to keep the ship stable and to keep it headed into the waves so that it wasn't tossed to and fro on the oceans. These drogue stones are over 200 miles from the closest ocean and about 5,300 feet or 1,615 meters above sea level. They have no business being here other than that a huge ship like the Ark dropped them here. So they're a long ways from any water, and they have no business to be here other than that a large ship dropped them here. The numerous stones discovered near the Drupanar site are the largest ever discovered in the world. This would make sense as the Ark was massive in size and would need extra large stones to stabilize it. Many of these stones have crosses carved on them from early Christians visiting this site, and others have crosses that are from the Crusader period from around 1200 AD. Some of the stones have 8 crosses on them, representing Noah and his family that were saved from the flood. Several of the stones have been used as grave markers as well. One of these stones has an ancient carving that appears to be the Tower of Babel. The 3 layers carved on this stone are believed to represent the 3 levels or decks of the Ark as mentioned in the Bible. Another stone has unknown ancient writings on it that have yet to be interpreted and translated. All these carvings reveal that this site was venerated long ago and visited by religious people for thousands of years. Another large stone is believed to have been used as a sounding stone for measuring the depth of the water under the Ark.
In 1990, Ron performed what he called a mini excavation, where he took shovels and bent the blades into a giant razor. He and his associates then shaved off a very thin layer from one section, smoothing it to show the color difference between the structure members and the matrix.
We are now standing on the middle deck of the Ark, and now pan over to the interior of the port side, where we can see 4 horizontal protrusions in a row. They are arranged in a regular pattern, indicating man-made construction. These would have been horizontal deck support timbers, extending toward the middle of the deck. At the stern, we can see the symmetrical shape of the boat, including the center mound, where the decks have collapsed, one on top of another. Continuing to inspect the stern, we can see 5 objects in a row along the inside port area of the deck. These have been measured at regular intervals and appear to be vertical posts that would have supported the deck.
Resistivity imaging is complex and has improved greatly with the advent of more powerful computers and resistivity systems. Basically, an electrical charge is used to map underground features based on the electrical resistance of the objects under the earth. It took several days to complete the scans, and what the 3D images showed was consistent with that of a ship that had suffered a great deal of damage. After all, if it is Noah's Ark, as we all believe, it is the oldest man-made object on Earth and is impaled on a massive outcrop of rock. The scans clearly showed that this was not a natural object, and it looked like a massive shipwreck. Looking at the hull shape in 3 dimensions, the resistivity images showed that the front section, which lies beneath the ground, resembles the form of a ship, which is streamlined and with the shape of a deep hull design. The resistivity values of the material forming the hull are also the same above the ground as they are beneath. This indicates that the same material makes up the entire hull shape, and that this material is relatively impermeable to water. It is a hard substance which has retained its shape. Around the edge of the site are features which Ron believed to be the ribs of the ship. The scans revealed even more encouraging evidence than we could have ever asked for. They showed that the material forming these ribs continued below the ground surface and curved underneath the vessel, Just as a rib timber would be expected, the electrical resistivity of the material forming the rib was more resistive than the surrounding mud, and the level of resistivity did not appear to change with depth. Ron Wyatt used to point on the inner side of the ship's hull to a series of equally spaced protrusions which are projected at 90 degrees from the outer edge of the hull towards the inside of the ship. He believed these were deck joists which once held a floor or ceiling of some type. The scans revealed that these protrusions were of the same resistivity as the apparent rib material. They also revealed that they extended back into the hull and connected directly to the adjacent rib, exactly as Ron believed. In 2019, radar scans were again done, which we helped finance but were not present for. They also revealed the presence of straight lines, which were consistent with walls, and 90-degree lines consistent with being rooms. We believe this is a ship, a massive ship. It bears the shape of a ship and the features of a ship. It is 6,300 feet up in the mountains of Ararat. The internal features are exactly the dimensions given in the Bible using the ancient cubit of 20.6 inches, later called the Royal Egyptian Cubit. Finding Noah's Ark means nothing if it does not strengthen our faith or lead a non-believer to the knowledge of the truth that we have a Creator who loves us and wants us to come to Him and be saved by the blood of His Son.
Photos taken at different times of the year have brought out different features of the boat. There was so much convincing evidence uncovered at the site that the Turkish government declared this area to be Noah's Ark National Park, and yet today, the world is unaware of this amazing discovery.
When I started praying that God would change me and do whatever was necessary in my life so that He could work in and through me to help others come to Him and be saved, things started to change.
So, regardless of his doctrine, regardless of his denomination, regardless of how he viewed end-time prophecy, which is all completely different than mine, God looks at the heart. He looks at those who are humble. He reveals His secret to those who are humble and those who truly are seeking Him. Ron Wyatt claimed to find the blood of Jesus Christ. He claimed to find it in Jerusalem in an underground chamber where the garden tomb is, or Golgotha is, on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to look at this objectively, and I'm not going to say that he absolutely did find it, but I'm going to show you several reasons that indicate that he was telling the truth. And you need to use discernment. Pray to God over this. Don't just watch it and believe everything. Actually test the spirits and see whether these things are so. Prove all things.
And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent.
But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. And there are three that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood, and these three agree in one. If we receive the witness of men, the witness of God is greater. For this is the witness of God, which he hath testified of his Son.
So anyway, I was walking along the cliff face behind this bus station back in this area. I was walking through there. My left hand went out without my brain doing it, and my mouth said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto and the Ark of the Covenant's in there." Well, I was dumbfounded. This sort of thing doesn't happen to me. In fact, I resist that sort of thing because people that I consider wackos say they have those kinds of experiences. And I still think that most of them that say they have these experiences are wackos. But sometimes, in other words, I don't feel comfortable with that kind of experience. But our tickets were due the next morning, so we flew home. I told the man, he said, "That's wonderful." He says, "We'll let you dig there. We'll give you all the help you need, a place to stay, provide you food, do your laundry." And this is Israeli. They don't do that. We went home, and I had no idea why the Ark of the Covenant had been there. I'd never even thought about it. My cup was running over already with things that God had shown me. And so, I was not looking for anything else. So I went home, prayed, and asked the Lord to help me understand why the Ark of the Covenant might possibly be in that place. I was impressed to read the history of the conquest of Jerusalem, and in this 2 Kings chapter 25, it says that Nebuchadnezzar built forts against the city round about. That in modern language is a siege wall. Now this meant that nobody could take anything out of the city or bring anything into the city. So the Ark of the Covenant had to be hidden in the city, under the city, or inside the siege wall. All right? Well, we don't know for sure where the Babylonian siege wall was located, but we know where Titus's siege wall was located. All right? Catapults had the same range back in Nebuchadnezzar's time as they did in Titus's time. And they always built these siege walls out of range of the catapults that were defending the city. So we know where it had to have been. And from that siege wall, people could not observe, watchmen walking the wall, the siege wall, couldn't observe somebody bringing something out into that cliff over there. So I thought, okay, that makes it reasonable. We got ready, came back and started digging. January 1979. In January 6, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I found the Ark of the Covenant. You would not believe the amount of stone and dirt and everything we had moved. The little Arab guy that was letting us eat at his restaurant, he was a full-grown man, but he's about that tall and small, petite. So as we went through this cave system, he would crawl into the chambers, and I'd give him a light, and he'd shine it around, and I'd peek through to see if it looked like anything in there. So we did this over and over, and we came to this one hole. You wouldn't believe where all we had gone in that cave. And at this point in time, we had gone about 45 feet down and then back up. And here this hole was in the wall, about that big around, and there was a stalactite hanging right down the middle of it. The only stalactite I had seen in the cave that wasn't just little ones. This was a big one, and I had it. in my collection of things. So I broke it off, made the hole big enough for him to get in, and he was crawling in there, and I started to hand him the light so he could do what we had been doing, several days. He came tearing out of there. His eyes were big as human eyes can get, and he said, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." And I said, "Well, what did you see?" He said, "I didn't see anything." And I thought, well, okay. Now, he'd been in tighter places than that and had not responded that way. So I got this little beam of light, in a very dark place here. And I thought, that is divine terror. That's supernatural terror. So I figured that is either where the Ark of the Covenant is, or it's the way to get to it, one or the other. And God doesn't want this fellow to know where it is. So anyway, he said, he just said, I must get out here. So I made the hole big enough for me to get in. I got in there, folks, it was full of rocks, bigger than these here, up to within 18 inches or so of the ceiling. If this young man had been terrorized and come scooting out of there like he did, I would not have gone in that place. But we beat the rocks. We've had thousands of them for 3 years. So anyway, I crawled in there with a flashlight, and I crawled around on top of the rocks, and I shined the light down between the cracks in the rock, and there a flat gold thing reflected back at me. So I moved over and shined down through another. There was two reflections, one here, one there, and one over here. So I knew it was a flat gold top. And I thought, the Ark of the Covenant. I forgot about the cherubims, sitting on top. They'd have been poking up through the top of Mercy seat. But anyway, I started moving these rocks, and I stuck them everywhere I could. By the time I got down to that gold surface, I had them behind my shoulders, leaning back against them, and it was the table of showbread. Well, hey, that's not a bad thing. But anyway, I was looking for the Ark of the Covenant, and it was only then that I took time to carefully examine the rest of the chamber. See, I had just crawled in, took a quick look, and started checking down under the rocks. So as I moved the flashlight along the wall, I saw a stone box sitting against the wall about this low, this much space between it and the ceiling. The lid was broke, slid around, and right above it was a crack with dark brown-looking material at the bottom of this crack. And I was able to see the top of the lid of the box. On both sides of the broken pieces was more of this brown stuff. All of a sudden, I realized I was sitting in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and that Christ's blood fell. I had never heard anybody preach anything about that sort of possibility. And it's too much for me. When I regained consciousness, I looked at my watch, and 45 minutes had passed from the time I crawled in the chamber, because I figured I'd find the Ark of the Covenant in there. I wanted to know what time it was. So anyway, it was 2 o'clock when I entered the chamber. And after I regained consciousness, it was 2:45. I couldn't see down in there, but I knew what it was.
Now, I'm not a body language expert, but this guy seems to be telling truth. He seems to be recollecting real events by his hand movements and just by the way that he explains things. And I cut a lot of this out as well just to condense it for this video, but again, I'm going to be objective about this. My main point here is that he really does seem to be recalling events as he experienced them. If you were to visit the Garden Tomb today in Israel, you would be able to see the tomb that Jesus Christ rose from. You can see the skull, where the Bible describes it as Skull Hill, Golgotha. And you can also see the place where they covered up Ron Wyatt's excavation, the place where Jesus was crucified. And it's pretty hidden, so you have to know where it is. This family here who is visiting the Garden Tomb, fortunately for them, the gardener, he knew where Ron Wyatt's excavation was. And then they met a guy who said some pretty interesting things. He was putting the puzzle pieces together and connecting the dots. So have a listen to what he has to say as well.
Our prayer that we pray in the Lord's Prayer as in heaven, so on earth, this was God's desire, because He knew that we were slaves to sin. We were slaves to the slave owner at the time, and the slave owner had been given, ownership had been given over to the devil. Well, when He actually was crucified, it was the innocent Lamb, the God that takes away the sin of the world. Well, it says that He took His blood into the heavenly holy of holies, but also as in earth, because it says there's three witnesses in the earth: the blood, the water, and the Spirit. So the blood and the water came out of the side of Jesus. At the time of the crucifixion, there was a great earthquake, and the rocks were rent. And of course, you can see, if you go back there, you can see where they filled it in. But I saw before it got filled in, they literally filled in the cracks that he down through here.
So you yourself saw?
I saw it before they filled it in. And you can see it on the other side where they did fill it in. But the crack comes down here, and the crack came down, and it was right at the base of the cross. And so then after Jesus had died, Spirit, out came blood and water, poured down, and it dropped onto the mercy seat.
Right, exactly. So then, you've been to Zedekiah's tunnel or caves or wherever in there and everything?
I know essentially
where it is.
How to get in.
So that's two things we wanted to do today was come here and see this, and go to his tunnel, kind of just see. We don't want to obviously try to find it, but because you actually saw Ron Wyatt and met him.
Yeah.
What was your name?
Probably.
Right.
I mean, it's 30 years ago.
Really? Wow.
And so I was just sitting across the table. I was a proud young kid. And I talked to him for a while, and then I realized how stupid I am, because when you're in the presence of somebody who's humble, then your pride gets really shown for what it is. And so that was pretty.
So this, wow. So it's underneath us.
This is the Ark of the Covenant, and white people don't understand it. They don't. I guess they don't understand the covenant.
Right.
They don't understand the blood. They
Right.
don't understand what God was doing.
Right.
The reason we have the freedom and the spirit that we have is because the blood is now
on the ark. It was supposed to anoint the ark. I know.
And that's what made it so that we can have the spirit, because it's holy. You heard that they sent 6 people in and tried to pull that out of there.
Yeah, and they died.
Right. Do you know why?
They weren't allowed to be in there yet. Papa said no.
But do you know why?
Well, then they're more.
They would profane the ark.
Yeah.
Well, what's profaning the ark? Well, what's on the ark? What's on over there? The blood is.
Blood.
What's the blood doing? It's speaking a better thing than that of Abel. And the thing is, it's the throne of God in the earth, as in heaven, so on earth. We got something rocking. I mean, I say rocking, but we got something going on here. This is, to understand. That won't be messed with until that which restrains him is taken away.
Exactly.
And when that happens, we're going to have hell revealed on this earth. And that's the great tribulation.
Important witness that is going to be an important witness.
Right.
That blood on the ark, that has to be preserved until the time's right.
Must be.
Yeah, and then when the abomination of desolation is when the man of sin sits on the throne and proclaims himself God.
Right. So whatever he does to profane, because that's what the devil's always trying to get into the midst of something to profane it.
I'm so thankful to run into you guys.
Yeah,
this have confirmation from someone else. We try to tell our friends this, and they just don't. They just don't want to believe it because it's too crazy.
So if you're wondering why they're so interested in Zedekiah's cave, it's because Ron Wyatt found the entrance. There's an actual tunnel that'll take you right to the Ark of the Covenant chamber, and it's sealed off right now because Israel sealed it off.
And then you can also see a wall that Ron Wyatt is standing in here, and let's take a closer look at this wall.
So I'm going to read from a book that was recently published with all of Ron Wyatt's discoveries, and apparently on this gold detector test that they did at the Garden Tomb. In 2016, 36 tests were done using a directional metal detector in order to confirm the Ark of the Covenant. Prior to conducting these tests, the detector was tested to see if it could detect a gold coin about 15 feet away, and next to try and detect an 8-inch 18-karat gold chain about 10 feet away. In both cases, the detector pointed to these objects without failure. Over the course of several days, the detector was used in front of the cutouts in the rock of the crucifixion site of Christ that we had mentioned earlier. Below this area should be the Ark of the Covenant, but could a detector pick up a reading for gold and the Ark at a depth of 50 feet? Tests were done in front of the rock escarpment about 20 feet away, then at 45-degree angles, then over to each side. In every test result, the detector pointed to the correct location of the Ark. After receiving these readings, the detector was positioned over the spot that should be the center of where the detector had been pointing. When placed over this spot, the detector began to spin, meaning the gold is directly below. This was still another confirmation. When moved away from this spot several feet, it would point back to where the ark should be. It repeated this time after time without failure. The idea then came that the detector should get a real workout. How about trying it from 65 and 100 feet, respectively, from 3 different directions? Could the detector still find the ark? First, it was positioned at the overlook for Skull Hill, that is a raised platform at about 100 feet from where the ark should be. Amazingly, it once again pointed to the ark. Next, it was positioned 65 feet directly out from the rock face, and once again it pointed to the ark. Finally, it was positioned 100 feet toward the entrance to the garden tomb grounds, and once again it pointed to the ark. In order to get these long-distance test results, there would have to be a large amount of gold in that location. All in all, there were 36 test results. Every test that was done with the detector confirmed there was gold in the direction of the ark as reported by the late Ron Wyatt. There were no tests that contradicted the site. End quote. So you can see it's starting to spin because the guy is going over that spot again. And whenever this guy goes over that spot, it spins. And whenever he's not at that spot, it points back to that spot. Now, I have to admit, this was one of the most difficult things to research out of all the stuff that I've looked into when it comes to Ron Wyatt, because these metal detectors, or as they're more properly known as frequency detectors, have a lot of fake scam versions floating around on the internet. And it was very difficult to determine if this is actually something that could possibly be real at all. And once I asked my wife, she looked into it, she actually found out that these things can be real. It's just really rare because people are not looking for giant amounts of gold like this thing would find. If you're going to find a random piece of gold underground, you're not gonna, like, where are you going to look? This thing is not going to work very well for finding a little piece of gold that's buried into the ground like most people are going to randomly find, if they find anything at all. I mean, the device itself, these devices cost a lot of money, the real ones. And if you spend that much money and you actually end up finding something as well, like those two things might be kind of hard to put together because of just the statistical likelihood of you just walking around and finding a gold watch buried into the ground or something is just so rare that the reports of success are just nowhere to be found. So anyways, that's how the market kind of works for this item, but there are real ones, as you can see in this video. This is the video that my wife found from a channel where the guy can actually build the thing himself, it seems. He demonstrates how the detector will always point back to the gold coins, and then it will start spinning once it's above it, just like in the Ark of the Covenant video. Notice how when he pulls the device back away from the coins, it stops spinning and it starts pointing. But when he gets closer to the coins, it starts to spin again because it's right over the top of the coins. It's right over the top of the gold. So it's not the same model, but it's the same system. It's the same type of thing. You can look as much as you want, you'll never be able to find that model that they use for the Ark of the Covenant online because it's not even sold online. Because the people who are actually using these things, they don't go on the internet to buy them. They buy them in person where it can actually be demonstrated that they work. This whole time it was spinning was right over the top of the coins that he planted there. This shows that this type of device is real and it does work. And I do believe this is a very strong confirmation that there is a massive amount of gold below the site where Ron Wyatt claimed the Ark of the Covenant to be. Now, there's more. I'm going to read a personal testimony by a guy named Ian Fain, who is an eyewitness to a video shot in the cave taken by Ron himself. So let me just start reading. This is, by the way, from an email correspondence that he had made with arkdiscovery.com. This may be an appropriate time to mention publicly that I and several other Christians have watched with our own eyes a video which Ron shot inside the cave before the furniture was rearranged. The crack in the roof was clearly visible with the blood still on it. The table was there in close-up, and many piles of skins. The ark was there, but was covered by a brilliant white light, which hid it from the camera as Ron panned around the cave. To the best of my knowledge, there is only one copy of it in existence, Ron's original, and it's not in America now. It's in a safe place of the Lord's own choosing, to which I once took Aaron Sen, who has met the keeper but has not viewed the tape. I was an eyewitness of Ron's tape of the inside of the cave. I wasn't with him when he shot it, but I saw the tape not very long afterwards. Ron himself was keen that the tape should be seen widely. Events turned out otherwise, however. But for what it's worth, I'm happy to answer any questions I can about the tape and what I saw on it. I last viewed it some years ago, and my visual memory is not great. I'm far better with words. However, by the same token, my visual imagination is pretty bad too, which is probably a good thing for this purpose. My sole purpose in mentioning it here was to help strengthen the faith of some here whose confidence in Ron's word may have been shaken by doubts. How long is the videotape? The section shot inside the cave was part of a longer tape, most of which contained other less dramatic stuff. I'd say there were several minutes of material shot inside the cave. What quality is it? Shaky, steady, on a tripod, in color? Steady and in color. From what I can recall, I'd say it was almost certainly shot using a tripod and a single camera light, which Ron moved about in between shots from one part of the cave to another so as to get pictures of the contents from different angles. What type of lighting used? Good quality or poor? Grainy footage or clear? Single light fixed to the camera. As Ron panned around the cave, the light moved with the camera. Off-center, the edges of the frame were quite dark. The tape was free from grain, but the color balance was not great. I suppose it was NTSC, which in the days when I was a videotape engineer, we used to say stood for never the same color twice. Did you see any angels on the tape? No. Was there a timestamp on the tape itself that was displayed on the screen? Not that I recall, there wasn't. How long ago did you see it? Pass. That information might assist those who want to find the tape. Have you ever talked to Ron about the tape? If so, what did he say? I never talked to him specifically about the tape. I did ask him questions about the ark, about the tables of stone, and about the book of the law. I assumed at the time that everybody who knew anything of Ron's work had seen this tape along with all his other material. It was only when Bill Fry intercepted a post of mine to this list that I realized that this was not so. Even Bill hadn't seen it. The persons who have the tape, are they waiting for the right time to release it? Did Ron give it to him, her, them, or what's the reason for them holding it back? Same answer as to the previous question, I'm afraid. Sorry. From your perspective, is this the tape where Ron took out the tables of stone? Was this before or after the event, if it's not the same footage? No, it's an earlier tape. Neither Ron nor the tables appeared on the tape I saw. How many people were with you when you viewed it, and where did this occur? Australia? Only one person viewed it simultaneously with me, but several others had seen it just a few days previously. One has since gone to be with the Lord, but the others are still alive. The country name is under wraps, as per Q5. Does Ron say anything on the tape? If so, what does he say? No, Ron was the cameraman, but he didn't appear in front of the camera, and I don't recall his giving any verbal commentary on the sequence inside the cave. What does the table of showbread look like? To be honest, it looked dark bronze, but I suppose that was the effect of the camera light, which probably had a predominantly blue spectrum. The table was rectangular and had a raised decorative border a few inches high running all around the top, which what I took to be cast pomegranates at regular intervals. The cave sequence opened with a close-up shot of one corner of the table, showing some fine workmanship in its making. Did you see the 7-branch candlestick, and if so, what did it look like? No, I was consciously looking for it, but I didn't see it. Everybody asked this question. It's the most popular question after the ark itself. You said you saw the skins piled up in a corner? They weren't piled in a corner. They were heaped everywhere, all over the floor and everything else, lots of them. What conditions were they in? I don't recall any close-ups of the coverings, but the general impression was one of gray dustiness. They were folded up as you would fold a lot of blankets, and some were obviously covering large objects underneath. The menorah may have been on its side under them. Did you see any other object in the cave? And if so, what were they? At the time, I thought this tape was going on general release and that I'd be getting a copy sometime, so I didn't make any mental notes. But I do remember seeing the stone box in which the Ark had been stored, with its lid moved to one side. I have a feeling that Goliath's sword was there, but I have no particular mental image of it. Just that we discussed it between ourselves, and the reason for our discussing it was probably that it was in there. Of course, the dominant feature was the Ark itself, and the fact that it was hidden by a brilliant white light. As Ron panned the camera around, a circle of light moved across the field of view until it filled the whole screen, then it moved off again at the other edge. Ron's verbal account of this was that the effect was only on the tape. No such light was visible to him inside the cave when he saw the Ark plainly. It was only when he viewed the tape afterwards that he saw the light had covered the Ark for the purpose of the recording. The other notable feature was the crack in the roof of the cave with the dark stain of blood on one side of it, about the size of one's hand, I should think. The roof was not high. A man would probably have had to stoop to avoid hitting his head. Seeing the blood there was the most moving thing to me. I think if the Lord had wanted somebody to give a detailed account of the tape, he would have chosen somebody other than me to see it. My powers of visual observation and retention are famously bad. My principal contribution to this debate is simply that I can testify to having seen that tape, that it showed exactly what Ron said it did, and that I was awed at what I saw. I think we all were. Did the table of showbread have just one shelf, top one, or any below it too? I only remember seeing the top surface, and not much below it. I think it was perhaps partially covered by skins, but it was quite a while ago, and as I mentioned earlier, my visual memory is really terrible. How close to the ceiling was the Ark of the Covenant stone case? Very close. I remember being rather surprised at how low the roof was. I can't give you any meaningful estimate of the exact distance. I'd have to view the tape again to do that, but my memory is that it was about enough to crawl into and not much more. Was the chamber cleared out? Like, was Ron shooting the video from the floor of the chamber, or was he standing on stones, or what? You said he was close to the ceiling. Any thoughts on how close? The chamber was certainly not cleared out. In fact, apart from things like the lid of the stone box, it looked as though nobody had been in there for centuries, as I suppose they hadn't. The place looked like a lumber room, with things everywhere all over the floor, and of course all those heaps of skins, so that you would have to clamber over one thing to look at the next.